All right, welcome back to the Warrior Arts Renaissance Show, where you give us hard questions and we give you solid answers. The proceeds from today's show, in the monetized form, will go to support the Ezra Foundation in its ongoing effort to end human trafficking worldwide. So tonight we've got several questions on the agenda, and I told you if you ask them, I'll answer them. First one is comes to me and says. And this is actually kind of a personal thing, kind of a strike at me, I guess, if you look at it that way. Somebody listened into, I guess it was last week, maybe the week before, and I was answering a question, and I was talking about a personal experience, and I referenced God. Okay, I believe it had to do with, we were talking about Tai Chi and the healing aspects of the art, and I said that I firmly believe, being a believer myself, I firmly believe that God healed me. And I was asked, and I quote, "Where do you get off bringing God into the martial arts? This is a martial arts podcast." The only thing I have to say to that is, this is my podcast. Okay, I've got co-hosts who come on from time to time. I've got, we talk about things from different perspectives. Not everyone who comes on is a believer, and that's fine. But it's my podcast, and I was relating my personal experience. And if it bothers you that I referenced my faith, my Jewish faith, if you must know, whether you care or not, since you brought it up, I'll bring it out. If it bothers you that I brought up my Jewish faith and how it tied into a just an amazing experience that I had, the problem is you. Okay, if you don't like that, there are free apps out there all over the place. There's even some you can download, and they will help you make your own podcast. If you want to have a martial arts podcast, the combative science podcast, where nobody talks about God, nobody talks about faith, nobody talks about anything religious, more power to you. Go start your own podcast. Okay? Who knows? I might even listen to it. With that said, we're going to jump into the next question, which is almost kind of related. And I say it's almost kind of related because they say there are three things in the world you should never talk about: politics, religion, and her. Okay, her being your ex or somebody else's ex. And we talked about, for a moment, about religion, and said, if I'm going to need to share something about my faith in order to convey something about the martial arts on this podcast, I'll do it. Okay, well, the question then goes in, or not the question, but it tied into politics. And when I first read the question, I had to reread it because I thought really it was somebody asking about politics as in right, left politics, Republican, Democrat politics, that sort of thing, and the martial arts. And I thought, what on earth is this about? Why is there are liberals out there who will train in the combative sciences. I find in my experience there were a few of them. It tends to be very conservative people who are into these types of things. And I was just like, where is this question going? Yeah, I reread it. I'm really glad I reread the question because it wasn't talking about that at all. It was talking about politics as in martial arts, combative sciences organizations. Okay, and the question had to do with, when did politics come into martial arts? This is actually something that's very dear to my heart, this concept, this idea of politics in martial arts. Some of you will know that years and years ago, I'm talking 20 some years ago, around 1998 or thereabouts, I was part of a group that started a little organization called Fellowship of Independent Warriors. We didn't start out to be an organization. We started out, we were almost like a fight club. Okay, we were practitioners from different schools in one county in Indiana, and we wanted to to cross train, and we weren't allowed to. Okay, the teachers in some of the schools forbade us to go and train in other schools. You know, if I wanted to learn in this school, I couldn't go to that school. If I had a black belt in this school, this other school wouldn't let me in the door. And it was ridiculous. And several of us decided that, and so we started. I think there were 6 of us started out, maybe 7, and we got together at my school that I owned, and I said to heck with it. I don't care what the masters in the area think. We're going to cross train. And we did. And then somebody asked me a question about it, and they said, what's this organization that you started? And I said, we're not an organization. We're more like a fellowship, just made up of independent warriors. The name stuck. And we had stuck, and we ran that quote unquote organization for, I don't know, probably 10, 12 years, something like that. And it became our kind of our mission to be non-political in every possible way. It was a great organization. We did some great things. We ended up doing a lot of charitable work on several different continents. We did a lot of things that I'm really proud of. But in the end, we all grew as individuals. We all matured. We became husbands and fathers, and eventually it was just time for the FIW to cease to exist. Broke my heart, but I was also moving into this thing that I'm doing now, is this whole Kenshin International program. And it's more political than the FIW was, but not in the way that a lot of organizations are. A lot of organizations are political in such a way you can't train in different schools, or you can't train in schools that aren't in your same organization, or we'll accept rank from this school but not from that school. Doesn't matter if that other teacher is 10 times better than this other teacher paid dues into our organization. That's political garbage. Okay. We in KSRI, we go out of our way to not have that kind of politics. And yet what I found was, as I trained people up and created instructors, and now a few master grades going out into the world and training and teaching my curriculum, I had to have some way to govern that, okay, to make sure that it stayed not necessarily pure, because I've always said my Kenshinru doesn't have to look like your Kenshinru, okay? And mine is my interpretation of the principles, and yours is your interpretation of the principles. But there has to be those ties that bind, and there have to be standards. If someone's going to move up in rank, they have to meet certain standards. I have to be the one to make those standards, and to set them, and the lower rank instructors have to follow those standards. That is politics. Some people absolutely hate that. That's actually, in my opinion, not a bad politics. We have to have some measure, some way of making sure that the next generation training up under us is better, not worse than we are. Now I've gone kind of on an angle here, and talked about my journey through politics and in and out of the martial arts. Some of it. I mean, there were some other things. There were reasons why the FIW formed the way it did, when it did, and it had to do with me being disgusted with the politics in a lot of martial arts, and some of the things in the organizations I had been in. And but the fact is, and somebody told me this years ago, and I didn't understand it when he told it to me. He said, you're never going to get away from martial arts, or from politics in martial arts. He said, there's always going to be politics. He said, if there are 2 people in the room and they're talking, there's politics. He said, if there are 2 people in the room and they're interacting in any other way, there's politics. That was Brian Bolin, an old friend and training partner of mine from years ago. And at the time, I thought, that's crazy. We can get rid of politics. But here's the thing. If I'm in a room with my kids, there is a politic of the family, okay? Because I'm dad. If I'm in a room with my wife, there's a politic of the family, of the dichotomy there, because As I said before, we're Jewish and we have a very Jewish family structure. And I'm husband and she's wife, and there's an interaction there that is there's a social an unwritten social contract there that this is how we behave around each other. If I'm in my working in my business that I own with people who work with me, there's a politic there. Okay, but if I go to my other job where I'm not the lowest man on the totem pole, so to speak, but I'm certainly not the highest. Um, when I'm there, that's a different political structure that I have to navigate. Um, Anytime, just as Brian said years ago, anytime there are two or more people in the room, or two or more people interacting, it could be interacting by email, it could be on the phone, it could be my son and not talking about him as my son now, but talking about him as a lower level instructor in California while I'm in Indiana, and he's making a decision on how to teach something in a class, and he's thinking, what would Dad say? What would Dad do? Okay, because I'm a sensei, I'm a seafood. Um, there's always going to be politics, and so my thinking on it is, and I still haven't gotten to the answer to the question. Um, but my thinking on politics is this: when it comes to the martial arts, we need the very least possible politics to get done what absolutely has to be done for the preservation of the system. Okay? If you do anything more than it was absolutely necessary, I think it's a waste of time and energy, and you're probably driving away students and potential junior instructors. Um, but the question was, when did politics come into the martial arts? And my answer to that is probably the first time somebody taught martial arts. Okay, the first time somebody taught somebody else how to throw a stick or a rock and use it as a weapon, or how to take somebody down in a certain way. There started a martial arts politics there, not of the type that we're thinking of when we're talking about organizations, but of politics. And if you go back to quote unquote old world uh, martial arts, if you look in Europe, okay, the European martial arts were handed down usually either in a clan system or from like knight to squire, depending upon the country and the time period. And so there was definitely a politics there of um, a feudal. That's the word I'm looking for. A feudal politics. Same thing happened in China and Japan, but later China and Japan got very organized, and they actually and especially in Japan, had an organization that oversaw other organizations that oversaw other organizations that saw schools. It was very, very political, and it was that way until from the late 1800s um, up to from the ending of the samurai class up to about the end of World War II or thereabouts. And then things began to dissolve, and now you have 1,000 small organizations. In China, they went through similar things, similar phases, but at different times. Now, people say, well, what's the best organization since we want to avoid politics? Well, I've told you about KSRI, where it came from. Okay, obviously, it's my organization, so if it'd be crazy for me not to throw it in there. Beyond that, I only belong to 3 organizations. I used to belong to a whole bunch of them, um, and I just got sick of all the politics. I belong to or follow 3. Um, Actually, I couldn't even tell you a couple of them if I'm even technically considered a member anymore. I'd have to look it up. But one is Okuden Circle, and one is Kyusho Institute, and one is the Fumoshi Wu Dao. Now, the Okuden Circle is overseen by Jim Korn is one of my karate instructors, Grandmaster Jim Korn. And Kyusho Institute is run by Grandmaster Mark Klein. And I used to say I wanted to move like Jim and teach like Mark. Okay, and that's still kind of a goal of mine. And I need to look up and see if I'm even got my dues paid up in those organizations. But the key there, if you can catch it, is it's not really the organizations that I care about. It's the knowledge that I get from Master Korn and Master Klein. Um, and so long as your organization, whatever organization you're joining, gives you the knowledge and the skills that you're looking for, you don't have to play the politics. Just get the knowledge. Okay, if they make you play the politics to get the knowledge, then get out of there and do something else. That's my opinion. The other one I mentioned is the promotion Wu Dao that I'm actually on the master's board, the grading board for, and that's actually headed by Shashi Raymond Pridgeon, who was actually a couple times has been a guest on the show. Pretty much no politics there. Those guys, and the same thing with Master Korn and Master Klein. All the masters in the promotion Wu Dao are guys that I would want to be friends with if none of us did martial arts. Okay, if we all just met on the street and didn't know each other any other way, I would want to be friends with them. If we weren't in the same organization, we all just did martial arts, I would want to trade notes with them because they're very skilled, but they're also very good people. So I don't know if that really sufficiently answered the question. Like I said, I got off on a tangent that I wanted to kind of share a background there. I'm going to give it some more thought. I may revisit this topic in a future episode, but for now, it's all the time I have. Take care, and I will talk at you next week.